Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
And we welcome my other half, Courtney, to the mix.
Thank you. Yes.
You're going to do a story today that Kim McAllister covered, I think, quite thoroughly and in a detailed way.
I think that Kim might know this case better than me, actually.
Kim, are you going to participate, or is this usually where...
Yeah,
okay, good.
No,
All right,
I mean,
good.
if you want me to. I think Courtney's got the story.
Yeah, well, Courtney...
It's interesting about this story is my sister at the time thought she wanted to be like me. And so she went into media. She later discovered this was not her path. But at the time, she was working at the CBS affiliate in Sacramento, KOVR 13, which is kind of home base for the reporting in Modesto. So when Laci Peterson disappeared, my sister was sent out to talk to the family members and to get the story.
Oh,
and
my God.
There's this B-roll that is played in every single Laci Peterson story, documentary, news coverage, and it's of my sister and another reporter, I think maybe her photographer, standing and talking to Scott Peterson. And every time I see it, I think to myself, get away from my sister. You're too close to my sister. But yeah, so she was covering it in Sacramento. Of course, I was covering it on the radio in San Francisco on KGO from, the time she disappeared in Modesto to the time the remains were found at the Berkeley Marina to the trial in Redwood City. So yeah, both of us were on this story.
So for those of us who are new to this whole story, first of all, it's a Netflix series, I guess now.
Yeah.
American Murder, Laci Peterson. What is the story? She was a woman who went missing, apparently.
Yes. So we're talking about it this week. Tomorrow is actually the first time that Scott is speaking publicly since he was found guilty. Mm-hmm. And that is a special that's going to be on Peacock. And last week, August 14th, there was a limited series that came out on Netflix. And this is all, too, because an organization in Los Angeles called the Los Angeles Innocence Project has agreed to bring the case back on appeal, claiming that they have evidence that will exonerate Scott.
So Scott is her husband, I take it?
So Laci Peterson and Scott were married. Laci was 27. She was 8.5 months pregnant. Her due date was January 10th. And this all takes place in December of 2002. So they meet at a cafe. They're both really big foodies. They fall in love pretty quickly and get married. They're still in school. And then after school, they open a restaurant. They create a home together. But immediately after they get married, Scott begins cheating on Laci. And actually, one of his mistresses walks in on him and Laci, which is strange. I feel like Laci would have mentioned that to her parents. But that is, in fact, one of the stories that I heard while researching this case. And so Laci and Scott are married. She really wants a baby. She was effervescent. She was the life of the party. She was funny. She was smart. Everybody loved Laci. And I make this point because she would have just been such a wonderful mother. And so they did not get pregnant. They had challenges getting pregnant, but she was finally pregnant in the year of 2002. And so they go into the holidays, and Scott had said previously that he didn't want children, but then agreed to start a family with Laci, and so they get pregnant. When one of Laci's family members asked Scott what he wants, he said, "I was hoping for infertility." So that gives you a sense of how excited he was for the newborn baby. It said that he wouldn't even touch Laci's stomach. Yeah. Wow. So a lot of indicators that there were significant issues in this marriage. Now, Laci goes out, and it's said that she went on a walk the morning of December 24th, 2002. She is up in the morning. She's on the computer. This is all alleged by Scott. She is making some cookies. She's watching Martha Stewart. She's mopping the floor, even though the housekeeper had come the day before. And she takes the dog for a walk. Now, Scott had just bought a boat, and he wanted to put the boat in the water. So instead of driving 20 minutes to put the boat in the water, Scott decides to drive to the San Francisco Marina
Wow.
or Berkeley Marina and drop the boat there, which is an hour and a half from Modesto. So he decides he's going to go fishing, in air quotes, for the day and drives up there. When he returns at I think it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he sees their dog, Mackenzie. Mackenzie has a leash on, and Laci is nowhere to be found. So he does what every worried husband does. He immediately takes his clothes off and washes them. He takes a shower. He eats pizza with milk, which someone on TikTok said, that's the weirdest part of this whole story. And I thought, that's pretty strange. But he has this leisurely meal, and then he decides to call Laci's parents and say, is Laci with you? Because she's not here. And then he immediately says, Laci is missing. And that was an indicator to Laci's mother of something very strange, that he would immediately think that something terrible had happened to Laci. So he calls Laci's friends. Laci's stepfather calls the authorities, the police. The police respond within 13 minutes, and they begin to look for Laci. It is a very small community, as I know it, or at least it's explained in some of the coverage, Modesto. So there were hundreds of people that were coming together over the holidays and looking for Laci, making posters. They set up sort of a home base at the Red Lion Hotel. And from there, they were going out and searching the park where she had gone for her walk, the neighborhood. And then, of course, they searched up in and around the bay. Now, something too important to know is that they took dogs out that found the scent of Laci at the home and then trailing off. And then they also found the scent of Laci in the bay. So whatever happened to Laci happened within those couple of days of December 24th, December 25th.
So the dogs actually reinforce the notion that this is exactly what happened.
Exactly. And I bring that up because, and I'll get into it in a second, but some of the evidence that the Los Angeles Innocence Project and Scott's family suggests is that Laci was kidnapped by some burglars who burglarized a house across the street. But it's then they would have had to drive an hour and a half to dump the body. It's all just ridiculous. So Scott, now, he won't let any of his pictures with Laci go up. He refuses to do any media that shows his face. He's sort of lackluster in his commitment to finding Laci. They wanted to search the house. He asked the police, he said, am I really going to sign this agreement for you to search the house without a lawyer? And then he said to the head detective, where is the trust? And they were like, if you were innocent, you would let us search this house. She could have had a stalker online. Something could have happened.
It works both ways. I have nothing to hide. I trust you guys. Go
ahead. So, so everyone's really suspicious of Scott. And then on December 30th, 2002, a woman comes forward, and her name is Amber Fry, and she is, in fact, Scott Peterson's girlfriend. So they had met November 20th of 2002. They had a whirlwind romance where 2 weeks into the meeting, Scott's picking her daughter up from school and has a key to her house. And he, in fact, joined her for this Christmas party, which is sort of this infamous picture on the right, if you're watching. But he had told Amber he was not married, he did not have kids, and had led her to believe that he wanted to create a life with her. He, in fact, said, your daughter, Ayanna, is enough for me. I don't need any more kids.
Wow.
So she comes forward on December 30th and calls the Modesto police, tells them that she's been in this relationship with Scott. Scott does not know that she came forward. And through friends, she discovers that, in fact, her boyfriend, again in air quotes, is a suspect in the case of his missing wife, or at least he's a person of interest, I should say. So they, I don't know what you would call it, they bug her phone and they start to record her conversations with Scott.
The authorities do.
The authorities
They tap her phone.
They tap her phone because they want to record her conversations with Scott. Of course, they're hoping that Scott will admit to the crime, but it is really Amber's testimony that puts Scott, the jury finds him guilty. And in fact, in the documentary by Netflix, they have Juror 1 and Juror 4 come in and talk about it. And they thought he was guilty because there was no forensic evidence connecting him with Laci, with Laci's body. There was no DNA, but Amber Fry's testimony is what convinced them that he was guilty.
Wow.
Now, if you go up, sorry, Tony, there's a picture of the candlelight vigil. This happens on New Year's Eve, and it's actually a really important part of the story with Amber because Scott is calling Amber from this candlelight vigil. He is calling his girlfriend from the candlelight vigil for his wife, who is missing, to tell her that he is in Paris at the Eiffel Tower. I mean, the fabrication and the lies and the network of misinformation and you know, just the whole thing that he had fabricated for Amber was absolutely ridiculous and so incriminating. But in fact, that call was one of the most important calls.
That's what did it for me. That's what did it for me when I found out that he was calling his mistress from his wife's candlelight vigil and the things he was saying. And at one point he said, he was on the phone with her. He said, "You don't."
Oh, she dropped out. Kim dropped out. What was he saying on the phone? She was just talking about that.
Well, there was a lot. I'm curious to see what she was going to say. But
go ahead. What was he saying on the phone?
At one point, he was saying to her, "Oh, this is about my first holidays. I had lost my wife." Right?
Yeah.
Like as if she died way back when, or, you know, before they started dating, and not that she's currently missing. It's wild.
Yeah. Wow. So eventually Amber has to come forward because the press starts to hear rumors about a girlfriend. And so she holds a press conference. And it is then, too, when Laci's family is like, yeah, he's guilty. So, so there's still no bodies. Now, if you go down, Tony, there's actually a visual of Connor's nursery. And very early on in Connor and Laci being missing, he turns Connor's nursery into a storage room. That's not what you do when you're anticipating the return of your wife and unborn son.
He is cold.
All evidence. Yeah, he actually turned in Laci's car on February 4th of 2003 and bought himself a truck.
He is cold.
The authorities had trackers on his 2 trucks, and that becomes important a little bit later. So he's still calling Amber. Eventually, Amber stops communication with him, and it is on April 13th of 2003 that little Connor's body washes ashore in the San Francisco Bay.
Wow.
Yeah, or Berkeley Bay. I get confused because I'm not as familiar with that area, but
yeah, it's the San Pablo Bay. I believe it's the Berkeley Marina where the remains washed ashore. Yeah,
I love that Kim knows the story so well.
So
what was that like the day that the body washed up? That had to be a huge day, right, Kim?
Well, there was the search for her was unbelievable. I mean, it was daily news. There were reporters camped out outside of the home on the street every morning. The top story was, "Is she found yet? Where is she? What's happening now?" So when the remains washed ashore, I think people were surprised that it was in the Bay Area, and it was a huge story. I mean, there were cameras from every single network. You know what, like a major story where all the live trucks from everywhere, it was a national story. So really, really sad. And I think everyone just felt dejected. You kind of knew that it was going to end up in a bad way, but you kind of held out hope until that moment. So everyone that had been so invested in the story and, you know, her beautiful smile and her pregnancy, she was 8 months pregnant at the time. People just were holding out this hope, and it was just a day of sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so exactly. And so Connor's body is found on April 13th, and then Laci's body washes ashore on April 14th. They're about a mile apart, but still in that San Francisco Bay, Berkeley Marina area. And so with the bodies being found, it took them a couple days to do a DNA test, but they arrested Scott. And Scott was in San Diego. That's where his family was from. And I bring up the trucks earlier because Scott was in a new used Mercedes-Benz that he bought with his mother's money under his mother's name because they knew he was being tracked in the trucks. And so the police go on a chase and arrest him, and they drive him back up to Modesto. Now, in the car, he asks them, like, you know, "Oh, were the bodies, you know, Laci and Connor?" Of course, he knew they were. And the police, in fact, said, yes, we've confirmed that the bodies were Laci and Connor. And as they're driving up to Modesto, which is like 7 hours, 8 hours, they stop for food. And Scott orders this huge In-N-Out order. And that was also a sign to the police.
My God, this
you've
guy
just found out the bodies of your family have washed ashore, and you still have a rather large appetite. All of these things are circumstantial, but they are all evidence of a man that just did not care. If you go to the visuals, Tony, and if you're watching, within the car, they found basically a survival kit. I mean, it's insane. They found $15,000 in cash, which his mother had given him. This is how he was arrested.
His mother really backed him up a lot. Gave him the money for the Mercedes and $15,000 in cash.
His parents paid Mark Garagos $1 million to defend him.
And so he's from this wealthy family?
He's from a wealthy family.
Jeez, man.
So he had dyed his hair and his goatee orange, yellow. He had claimed that it had turned that in the pool or in the sun, but he had in fact gone to a hair salon and dyed it. There's the $15,000 cash. And we can just go through the other visuals. I mean, it's insane. There's snorkel equipment. There's knives.
Oh, my God.
There's 4 cell phones. He had stolen credit cards from some of the family members. He also had his brother's ID, which he looked like his brother. So, of course, the assumption is that he was going to go and flee to Mexico with the cash, with the cards, and then with the fake ID. Yeah, I know. The snorkel equipment it's all just ridiculous.
Gosh.
And it's so hard to look at that. I still question why people would even think that this man was innocent, but some people do.
Somebody actually rated his booking photo, which we do on this show. I didn't. We only do it in Florida, but they gave him a 9.5. He's a handsome guy.
Is that out of 10?
Yeah, yes, out of 10. There he is.
Out of 100.
He looks better alongside his $15,000 cash that his mom got him.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so crazy. How do you how do you convince someone that an innocent man changes his physical appearance, steals credit cards, has a fake ID, has a car that his mom has bought him, and he also was carrying pesos as well. So
I'll tell you what, why can't I have a family like that? You know, I don't remember my I mean, I have a good family. I love my family. But they're not that kind of, they don't step up like that.
No. They're
anyway,
not,
go ahead.
So he's arrested. He is
charged with murder.
Charged with murder, first degree for Laci, second degree for Connor. And the case starts. He hires Mark Garagos, as I mentioned. So his parents paid $1 million for his defense.
Garagos, the famous attorney.
Yes.
Right.
And then Amber Heard
They're on the right.
Retains Gloria Allred. And so Gloria Allred does her case pro bono. But it is, in fact, Amber's recorded conversations and her testimony.
Not Amber Heard.
Not Amber Heard. Amber Fry. That really convinces the jury of his guilt, in addition to all the strange behavior that we've been talking about. If you go down, there's one more visual for this. A big point in the defense was that the boat was really small, so it wouldn't have been able to hold Laci's weight and his weight. But in fact, they did. What is that when they put a woman of the same size as Laci into the boat to demonstrate that could in fact have happened.
Okay.
He bought 90 pounds of concrete, and they only found 8 pounds, meaning he had made all of these different anchors to sink the body. But he couldn't justify where 82 pounds of concrete had gone, or 80 pounds of concrete. So that, in fact, went to different homemade anchors that he had created to sink the body. So he is found guilty, and he is sentenced to death. I'm told in my research just how heartbreaking and how much people remember the testimony from Laci's mom in the sentencing. So he's sentenced to death. Scott's sentenced to death. He's taken to San Quentin. And then some of the issues come. I guess when you are sentenced to death, there's an automatic appeal.
Right.
And so he has been appealing since his death sentence. There were some issues with the jurors. Some jurors lied on their questionnaires, and so that became an issue. And in fact, they resentenced him because of that from death to life without parole. And then he had been writing to this organization called the Los Angeles Innocence Project, and they have decided to take on his case. Now, quickly, they are saying that a burglary that happened across the street from Scott Peterson's home on anywhere between the 24th and the 26th, but they're assuming it's around the 24th, because as of the 25th, there was a lot of press and media and people at Laci's house. So they're saying the burglary had to happen before that. Mm-hmm. But that burglary across the street, Scott's defense is trying to say that the burglars of that house took Laci, and they were the ones that killed her. And they're using...
There's no evidence of that or anything. Just
no,
weird.
Just eyewitness testimony. But people get it wrong all the time. There were 11,000 tips initially around this case. I mean, people think that they see things, and they want to believe that. So they're using eyewitness testimony, the burglary of the house across the street, and then there was an orange van that was found nearby. And that orange van was someone put it on fire. Someone, tried to destroy the van. And within that van was a mattress, and that mattress has blood on it. So they're petitioning to test the mattress that is inside this van to see if it's Laci's DNA. So,
gosh.
Laci's blood, yeah. And then earlier, there were some visuals of just like who the burglars were and a timeline. I mean, again, the mail delivery person said that they came just after 10 a.m. and there was no dog barking, and the dog used to always bark. Now, the dog could have been running around, but then the neighbor found the dog and brought it back. So there's issues with the timeline, but certainly Scott Peterson killed Laci Peterson. There is no question about that. So we'll see what comes. If for anybody that's interested, the Peacock special debuts tomorrow, August 20th, and that is an interview with Scott from prison.
But the Netflix series is on now.
The Netflix series is on now. So If you have a Netflix subscription and you're interested, it's a 3 or 4 part series. It's really interesting, and I thought it was well done. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a horrible story. I have to say I was really emotional listening to it. Her mother has a very large role in this Netflix series, and you can feel her pain. You can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it. It is tangible. And know that, yeah.
The mother, I remember the video very well, came out during Laci's disappearance, before the remains had washed ashore in Berkeley, and said, we don't think Scott did this. She was asked at a press conference, and Laci Peterson's family, including her mother, were supportive of him.
Yes.
They didn't believe. She said, we can't believe that he would do this. We don't believe that's the case. And then come to find out, after all the trust they put in him, that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah. Mothers can really overlook a lot of stuff, I find. Like, those terrorists, like the 9/11 terrorists, no, not my son. No, not my son. They'd never, actually, it was your son, and we've got video and everything.
Yeah.
I mean it goes to show how he really duped everyone around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's charming and handsome and wealthy and all those things that, matter. But the weird thing was the way the family overlooked all the evidence. It's just pretty...
And Jackie, who is Scott's mother, had the audacity to write to Laci's mother and ask her to delay the services, the funeral for Laci and Connor. So, quote, once Scott is exonerated, we can all join you. It's what are you talking about? She also refused Laci's mother's access to their home because Scott still was the person that owned the home, and Jackie was given sort of the oversight of the home. She would not let Laci's family come in and grab Laci's belongings. And that was just to further hurt them because they believe that Scott was guilty. It's just awful. It's awful what Scott's family did.
The last thing I'll just ask you is, again, the Innocence Project, you associate them with sort of a righteous battle, like taking DNA, in cold cases and all these things that, somehow right or wrong. And clearly, in this case, they've taken a situation in which all the evidence points to this guy. There's really no question at all about it. And they've taken up this case. What do the documentarians and others who they spoke to say about that?
Well, you make a really great point, which is There is the Innocence Project, which is a 501c3 organization that works to exonerate.
That's Barry Scheck, I think, is involved in that. Yeah.
And then there is the Los Angeles Innocence Project,
which is bought
does
and
not
paid
look
for.
like it's a 501c3.
How big a check do you have?
Yeah,
We can
they
find-
are not. And the Innocence Project, of course, went to social media and said, we are not doing this. We are not relitigating this. We're not investigating this. Go to the Los Angeles Innocence Project.
There it is. Red P says it's not the same Innocence Project, Mark. Completely different organization than the IP. Yeah.
So.
Wow.
But
Isn't
you're
that
right.
wild?
A lot of people are confusing them. I don't know very much. I tried to do some research on the Los Angeles Innocence Project, but there's not a lot of information there. As I mentioned before, Scott is the one that reached out to them. He continued to reach out to them, and then they decided to take on this case. So.
Very troubling. Interesting to hear from you, who follow this stuff, that you so much like the Netflix series, so you'd recommend it.
Yes, I would recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 4 parts? How many parts?
It's 3 or 4 parts.
Okay.
And I don't know much about Peacock. I will say that all of the true crime community and influencers that I follow and engage with have gone to social and warned people about this Peacock special, because it is an interview with Scott. So you
Right,
can
so you're hearing
imagine.
his side,
Yeah.
and it plays to him even more.
There's
so.
a lot of forensic psychologists that have looked at his interview with Diane Sawyer and just ripped it apart because of his subconscious behavioral patterns and things that he does with his speech and his breathing and his eyes that indicate, his guilt.
Wayne the Sane says the mother likely created this narcissist. There's the face-to-face with Peterson that was advertised. Yeah. The family still has a lot of dough, is the question John asks.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I know that his mother passed away, Jackie. I know that they had $1 million to spend on the
Passed away
defense.
before he could be exonerated, huh? Sad. Courtney,
exactly.
Thank you. You have
Thank you
done
for
it
having
again.
me.
A nice job.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming through. That is True Crime Corner for today.
True Crime Corner, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.